Welcome to disaster preparedness class. This is class number 5. We have one more after this, so let's get started. What should my plan look like? This verbiage is tossed around a lot in disaster preparedness classes, and people are told to make a plan, and I think folks need a little bit more guidance than that. We're going to take a look at what should be in your plan and why. To plan smartly, you have to know what you're planning for. What are the hazards where you live? Seattle does an analysis. They've done a big analysis a while back and they keep updating it and keeping it current. It is called the Seattle Hazard Identification and Vulnerability Analysis, or the SHIVA. This is available to you. It is a large document. If you're interested in reading it, it's all about the science behind why they choose what they choose. But these are the top 18 hazards. In the 5 or 6 years I've been working with the Office of Emergency Management here in Seattle, there's been very little change. There's a little bit of shifting, but not anything huge. Earthquake is always number 1. It's always been the top hazard for this area. And the reason for that is if we do have an earthquake, even a mild one, it will impact almost all of our systems. It will impact utilities and our food supply chain. It will impact your ability to communicate, your ability to get to work. It will impact schools and whether or not water is running to your house and all kinds of stuff. So many things are disrupted if there's an earthquake. So earthquake is always at the top. And in general, if you're well prepared for an earthquake, you are well prepared for many of these hazards that we face here in Seattle. Earthquake is number 1, snow and ice windstorms are number 2. Along with that are power outages, and those are typically weather related. Number 5, cyber attacks. That one I've seen it kind of float up and down the risks. I've never seen it higher than number 5, so that's kind of interesting. And I think it's interesting that number 7, disease outbreaks, is moved a little bit higher on the list than I am used to seeing it. But I think this gets shuffled around every 2 years. Out of the top 9, the top 7, basically the guidance is you shelter in place. There are not many hazards here in Seattle where the guidance to you is to get in your car and drive away. We just don't do that. We're a very dense city. We have many bridges to get across, so we can't just scatter in every different direction by a million different roads. You're going to shelter in place. You're not going to go anywhere. So why do I need a plan? The reason is if you can't communicate after the disaster, or if you just can't think clearly, a plan is super, super helpful because folks know what to expect. You don't need to go through that initial panic of, oh my God, we've never talked about this. I have no idea what the other members of my household are doing. You've already sat down and talked about it, and you have a pretty good idea. Everyone has a pretty good idea of what to do next. That's why you need a plan. Communications will probably be down after an earthquake. And if they're not down, they're going to be overwhelmed with everybody calling and trying to figure out what's going on. Or you do planning for things like a house fire when there is no time to sit and think about what to do. And if the fire, heaven forbid, is in the middle of the night, you're woken up from a deep sleep, that's not the time to plan on what's the best course of action. You need to do that while you're calm and everybody's sitting around the table and you can figure out what to do. So either there's no time or there's no ability to communicate. Lots of studies that have proven that if you think through disaster scenarios, even if you don't do anything, and if you just think through it mentally in your head, you are much better prepared than if you did nothing. Because at least you've thought about it, your mind has gone through that, down that path a few times, and it won't be as scrambled of a situation if you've at least thought about it. So you're thinking through this and hopefully acting through it. Peace of mind. People assume that because I do so much stuff in the disaster preparedness world that I am just a prep freak and that I'm constantly worried about this stuff. And I can tell you, I don't worry about anything. Prepare, do all that you can, and then forget about it. And that's my strategy. I don't think about this stuff. I don't worry about this stuff. I feel fairly confident I have done as much as I can do to protect myself and my family and make that episode of our lives as tolerable as possible. I want you to start with this scenario. When you sit down with folks in your household, this is the scenario I want you to think about. It's a Thursday, so middle of the week, it's middle of January, so it's cold and dark and rainy and really nasty. It's 3 o'clock, which means it's starting to get dark, or it's probably already dark. And everyone is out and about, not necessarily pandemic times, think of the before times. And where would people be on a Thursday afternoon? There's a strong earthquake. Assume you can communicate. If you could talk at that time and develop a strategy at that time at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, what would you say to one another? What would be the smartest thing to do? Who would go where? Who would pick up the kids? Who would pick up the dog? Where would you meet to reunite as a household? Think about all that stuff and then assume that you can't communicate, and that's your plan. This is my plan. I live in Northeast Seattle. I have a teenager who used to go to school at Seattle Center, and my husband, Dad, works down in the VA hospital. He is in the healthcare system. So that's on a typical Thursday afternoon. That's where we all are. I'm typically home, teens at school, Dad's down in Beacon Hill. There's an earthquake. Everybody knows, drop cover and hold on. Then you check on those around you. You're going to control your utilities, starting with gas and then electricity, and then turn that water off. You're going to try and communicate. For us, that is texting. And remember, I showed you the good text and the bad text. Make sure if you're going to text that you want it to contain some information that's very helpful. How you're doing, where you're at, what your plan is, and the date and time that you send that text. So text, include your out-of-town contact on that text chain. Again, my out-of-town contact is my mother-in-law in Vegas. So you want somebody to be Spokane, Washington, or further east. That's your out-of-town contact, and they can relay those text messages down to other household members on the ground if for some reason the text can't get across the city. So I'm texting 3 people, my teen, my partner, and my out-of-town contact. This is our plan. Dad, because he's in the healthcare system, he is expected to stay at work and help with patients. No big surprise. He's going to be there for a while. When he is free, he walks to the teenager, which is at least a 3-hour walk. That's minimum. They're both skilled, so there will be things that they can do, and they have skills to do that. Potentially spend the night. They have a phone number for friends that live nearby. Maybe they will spend the night there. They will try and get information on the bridges, because my family is split by the ship canal. So how are they going to get across that back up to our home in Northeast Seattle? So hopefully get information on bridges, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then after they get across the bridges, somehow, after they get across the ship canal, the walk home is at least 4 hours to get home. So I do not expect them for a couple of days. I will be obviously worried about them, but I know the plan. I know how long it's going to take. I have a general idea of what they're going to be doing. I will continue texting them, trying to get hold of them, but we at least have a plan. I know what to expect, and I know I'm not going to see them the evening of the earthquake. It's just not going to happen. A little bit about the ship canal, if your household is split across the ship canal. So there are a couple different cuts. There are 3 of those, and there are 8 bridges across the ship canal. And this is research I've done. It's not scientific. I'm just kind of guessing with the best information I have. So 8 different bridges. I'm not going to spend any time on this. I looked up the 8 bridges, what kind they are, how long they are, and basically the right-hand column is when they were retrofitted, if at all. The Aurora Bridge, the 99 bridge, is the one that has been retrofitted most recently. The Ballard Bridge and the Fremont Bridge are expected to be retrofitted, but I'm not sure if that's still the plan. The 2 bridges that have recently been retrofitted is the Aurora Bridge, number 5 here, and then number 6, the Ship Canal Bridge. This is a picture of the Seattle Hazard Explorer, which is available to you. You have a link there, hopefully on your notes, if not somewhere else more recently. It's a fabulous tool. When you go on it, there's different tabs. This tab happens to be the liquefaction tab. So what these pink areas indicate is liquefaction areas. It's a very odd phenomenon. To my knowledge, it's only an earthquake thing. What happens in these pink areas is the ground is not bedrock. It was put there by humans or deposited there by a river or something, but it's not glacial till. It wasn't compacted by a glacier, so it's not super hard bedrock. It's a little bit softer and looser than actual bedrock. So what happens during an earthquake is that area shakes, especially if it's super saturated. It shakes and it kind of becomes quicksand during the earthquake. And then as soon as the earth stops shaking, it becomes solid again. So if your house has slipped a couple inches and is starting to sink into this quicksand, or your car or your bike or whatever is starting to slip down into the quicksand, once it becomes hard dirt again, then it's stuck. And it's really difficult to dig things out because now it's hard dirt again. These are the areas you want to avoid because this is where a lot of the damage will be during and after an earthquake, is these liquefaction zones. If your building or your bridge or your home or whatever is on ground that is not susceptible to liquefaction, you will more than likely ride out the earthquake a little bit better with a little less damage. So I was starting to look at, on either side of the ship canal, what are the areas that are just going to be really difficult, either for a bridge to survive it and be stable enough to walk over, or potentially drive over, although that's really probably not going to happen. Where are the bridges going to have problems? Or if my spouse is trying to get across one of these cuts, where is it going to be harder for him to safely get up to the water, to swim across and get to the other side? So that's kind of my thinking of why I'm looking at the liquefaction zones on either side of the ship canal. The two bridges we talked about don't look too bad. The Aurora Bridge is much better off than the Ship Canal Bridge, just because the Ship Canal has liquefaction on the south end of it. Either one of these cuts really look pretty good. In my head, as a typical civilian looking at this, I would think those areas would be fairly safe to go up to and potentially cross. Again, his goal is to get across the Ship Canal and get back up and check on me and get our household reunited. So I don't think those two cuts are a bad idea. The other thing I looked at, again through the Seattle Hazard Explorer, is where is the land susceptible to landslides? The red dots on this map are places that are actual landslides from the past. They're usually steep hills and it has to do with lots of rain. So no big surprise. The yellow areas are areas that are susceptible to landslides. Again, typically because they're hills. I was just trying to see, are there landslides on either side of these bridges? Again, the cut's not looking too bad, either one of them. This is kind of what I've showed my spouse. He's down here, Beacon Hill, works at the VA hospital. Theoretically, I think his best bet would be to walk and try and avoid the liquefaction zones and then head up to the Montlake cut. That seems to be a good one for us, mostly because he's staying kind of on the northeast side of Seattle. He's staying east of 5. If he was headed up over here, I would find a different way for him to go home. But this is how I'm going to recommend he walk home. And I have not gotten, nor I'm not sure I will even try and figure out how to tell him how to walk from Beacon Hill. I can print out a liquefaction zone map, and that might be a good guide, but it's really going to depend on what happens during the earthquake. And so emergency plans during an earthquake. What you want to think about is how you're going to get your household back together. And maybe it's not back home. Maybe that is not the smartest place to walk. If you're both working on the eastern side, Kirkland and Bellevue or whatever, maybe walking back to Seattle is the worst thing you can do. So find a place over there. Get an idea of how long it's going to take. Maybe the smartest place is not your house. Other things to think about is your employer. Talk to them. Some of them had done some thinking, a lot of them have not, about what would you want me to do before I could leave? Or if you're the boss, what do I want my employees to do before they leave? Is it just shutting down computers? There's probably a million things depending on where you work, but what should be done, what could be done before they say it's time to leave? Your plan may be to just run out the door as soon as the earthquake's over with. It might be a better idea to check with your boss and go, hey, I've been thinking about this. Have you thought about this? What should we do before we go? Talk to your employers about what it is you should do. And if they haven't thought about it, tell them to contact the city. If you have kids, or if you have grandkids, or if you have neighbor kids, if there are kids in your life at all, think about the school. And if it's 3 o'clock on a Thursday, kids are probably still in school. What happens after a large earthquake is something schools call a reunification plan. And that goes into effect when the normal dismissal period 2:45, all the second graders are standing out on the curb and the buses are coming by, or parents are driving up, or parents are walking up, or whatever, that normal dismissal period is just shot. Talk to your school administrators, your teacher or the principal, and say, hey, what would happen if we had a big earthquake? What is the plan for letting all these kids go? And they will hopefully talk to you about their reunification plan. Schools have this, by law, they have this. In my experience, they're not very good about educating families, parents, what this looks like. And heaven knows the schools have a ton of work to do. I totally get it. They cannot fit one more thing into their schedule, and COVID and everything else. So I get why it's been on the back burner, but I would like for parents to know about it, because I think if you knew about it, your stress level would go down and everybody would be much better prepared that this is a slow, painful process. If you have a pet and they're not at your house, what's the plan with the pet sitter? If there's an earthquake, what are they going to do with their pets? You just got to start talking to people and figure out what makes sense for your family. And then if there's anybody in your life that has special needs, elderly parents, a disabled partner or child or whatever, that makes it more complicated and takes a little bit more thinking about how to keep people as safe as they can. So this is the school's reunification plan. Kids are huddled together out of sight of parents. So if there's windows in your kid's classroom, either the blinds will be pulled or kids will be ushered out of the classroom and they'll be taken somewhere else. They need the kids to be out of sight. They don't want parents running up to the classroom window, banging on the window, going, Johnny, Johnny, how are you? Parents gather some spot where the school tells them to do. So adults are all gathered together, kids are all gathered together. Parents need, or a guardian, whoever's picking up that child, has got to bring a photo ID. It doesn't matter if you know your teacher really well and you've had them for 3 years or whatever, you've got to bring a photo ID. This is a time when the school system really clamps down hard, and there will be very few, if any, exceptions. They want to make sure the right kid goes home with the right adult. Parents and children are paired up one at a time, which is why it takes so long. And then they typically leave by a back door. They do not run out the front door in front of all the adults so that the adult can swarm that little kid and ask them how their child's doing. They're typically escorted out the back of the school and they're just told to go on home, pick up your other 2 kids or whatever, pick up the dog on the way home, but head home and take care of yourselves. It is a long, slow, painful process. Parents need to know about it before it happens, just to keep their stress level down. That's the school reunification plan. And I have a video explaining a little bit more about it in your notes. Let's talk about your get home bag. We have these in both of our cars, and then my son has a modified version of this in the bottom of his backpack. You have the list on your notes for tonight's class. I'm not going to go through all the stuff. It's the stuff that you would need to make that walk home a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more tolerable. A little bit of water, some food, a whistle, a mask, pictures of your family, those emergency phone numbers we talked about. If you do it right, it takes up very little room. Put your bag together, download those navigation apps. You probably have them already, but make sure that the map is downloaded now. Emergency supplies. I'm going to talk about 3 different things. A lot of people in the world of disaster management talk about your go bag, because our disasters here in Seattle don't require us to grab a bag with, a week's worth of food and water. We're not going to be able to grab that. A, it's too much stuff. And B, there's no place to go. Here in Seattle, we pretty much shelter in place. So I talk about a stay box, which is your 2 weeks of supplies, a get home bag, which is that bag we just talked about, which is to help you get from wherever you are back to your home base, and then a go bag, which is something completely different. It's what would be helpful to grab if you're running out of your house because there's a fire or you're jumping in the back of an ambulance, that kind of rapid exit. We do have go bags in my family. We do have go bags for that, but it is not food and water. It is, what am I going to need while I'm sitting in the hotel room after a fire, or I'm sitting in the emergency room, waiting room, and I'm waiting to hear, how my family member's doing. So a go bag in my head is something very different. Stay box, go bag, and then the get home bag. A bug out bag, it's for evacuation. Again, we typically don't do that in Seattle. I'm going to go through this really fast. It's pretty well documented on your notes. It's for homeowners. My plan when I first started thinking about this, when we first moved to Seattle, was if there's an earthquake, I'm just getting out of town. I'm walking away from my house. I'm not going to live here for the 2 years it takes to rebuild Seattle. I'm not going to live here for, a year and a half without a running toilet. I'm just getting out. So then I started doing some research on what that actually financially looks like. FEMA will help with housing for about 18 months, but that is not rebuilding your house. That is helping you in a hotel room or the infamous FEMA trailers. That helps you have a roof over your head for 18 months, does not rebuild your house. There are grants, which you don't have to pay back, but it's $32,000 per household. I think it's per house, maybe it's per person, but still, it's not enough to rebuild your house. It's not enough to even really do much for repairs. That money is to help you cover expenses that are not covered by other insurance programs. Medical, transportation, getting back and forth to work because your car was smashed, that kind of stuff. That's what that $32,000 goes towards. Loans. FEMA does offer low interest disaster loans. It's from the Small Business Administration. You have to have $40,000 in property loss or a $200,000 real estate loss. It is a loan. So on top of your mortgage, now you have a loan in order to rebuild your house. In the foreclosure world, there's two types of state you can be in. You can be in a recourse or a non-recourse state. Crazy words, but I'll tell you what they are. A recourse state is basically you walk away from your mortgage, they are coming after you because you are still liable for that mortgage. You're still liable for that debt. A non-recourse state, the state has passed laws that said the lender can't do anything other than foreclose on the property. Whatever money they get out of your property after they foreclosed on it is theirs, but they're not coming after you for the difference. Washington is a non-recourse state, sort of. We're sort of in the middle of those two states. Here's my example. You owe $300,000 to the bank on your mortgage. Your house is uninhabitable. You stop paying your mortgage. It goes into foreclosure. The bank sells the house for $100,000. In a pure non-recourse state, the bank just eats that $200,000 difference. It's called a non-judicial foreclosure. A judge is not involved and it just stops there. The bank eats that $200,000. In Washington, we have the option of a judicial foreclosure, which means a judge is involved and gets to make the decision. In a judicial foreclosure, the bank can go after that missing $200,000. They can garnish your wages, they can put a lien on all your property, they can come after you, which is why I realized walking away from my mortgage is not a realistic option for us. If you refinanced your house, I'm not a lawyer, talk to a lawyer because things change radically. That's it for tonight. I know the foreclosure stuff was really fast. Again, it's in your notes a little bit. Class next week is preparing with neighbors and emergency communication hubs. So we've done a lot of talking about preparedness at a household level. Now we're bumping up to what could you and should you be doing with your neighbors? Very fun stuff. And then also what's kind of going on at the community level, which is super interesting. And again, a lot of fun. So that class is next Wednesday, October 13th at 7 p.m. I want to tell you about two upcoming classes. The radio class I told you about last week, and I put the sign up link in the chat, but it's also in the notes that are coming out tomorrow after I get the video uploaded to YouTube. The link to sign up for that class, if you're interested, Wednesday, October 27th, it'll be longer than 30 minutes, but hopefully not much. I just want to introduce the idea of radios and what they can and cannot do for you. So real basic. And then the next class is called the Rapid Exit class, and it's putting together that go bag. That bag, ours is sitting in our hallway closet right by the front door. If we had time, if it was safe to grab it on our way out the door because our house was on fire or somebody's getting into an ambulance, there's stuff in there that would make that 24 hours after that incident a little more tolerable. That's all for tonight. I'm going to stop sharing. See you in a week for neighborhood and community preparedness. Thanks, everybody.